Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. In the shadowed halls of Ravenswood Manor, a grand estate cloaked in Devon's mist, 8 guests gather for a weekend of secrets. Lord Reginald Ashford raises his glass, his smile sharp as a blade. Then a gunshot shatters the night at precisely 10:15. His body lies in a locked study, the key inside, no way in or out. Who among the glittering circle, heiress, colonel, actress, or butler, wields the heart of a killer? Enter Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells poised to unravel a web of lies, hidden affairs, and deadly betrayals. Was it greed, revenge, or a darker truth buried in the manor's past? Every clue counts. Every motive twists. Can you solve the impossible before Poirot's genius unveils the shocking truth? Dive into this classic mystery, where no one is innocent and secrets never stay buried. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the rolling lawns of Blackthorn Manor. A grand Elizabethan estate nestled in the heart of the Sussex countryside. Its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows exuded an air of timeless dignity. Yet beneath its serene exterior, a quiet tension simmered as if the house itself anticipated the storm about to break. It was August 1927, and the occasion was the annual gathering of the Ashbourne family, a ritual steeped in tradition but fraught with unspoken resentments. Captain Arthur Hastings, retired from His Majesty's army and now a frequent companion to the famed Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, stepped out of the chauffeur-driven Daimler and adjusted his hat against the glare. He had been invited to Blackthorn Manor by his old school friend, Reginald Ashbourne, the eldest son of the late Sir Henry Ashbourne, whose fortune in shipping had built the estate's opulence. Hastings had not seen Reginald in years, but the invitation had been warm, if slightly cryptic, hinting at family matters requiring a discreet presence. Hastings, ever eager for a change of pace, had accepted, though he could not shake a vague unease as he surveyed the manor's imposing facade. Inside, the great hall was a vision of polished oak and ancestral portraits, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax and lavender. The Ashbourne family and their guests were assembling for afternoon tea, a ritual presided over by Lady Margaret Ashbourne, Sir Henry's widow and the matriarch of the clan. At 60, Lady Margaret retained a regal beauty, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her gray eyes sharp and appraising. She greeted Hastings with a smile that was courteous but guarded, her gloved hand briefly touching his as she welcomed him. "You are most kind to join us, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "Reginald speaks so highly of you. I trust you will find Blackthorn Manor diverting." Hastings bowed, murmuring his thanks, and allowed himself to be ushered toward the drawing room, where the other guests were gathered. The room was a symphony of clinking teacups and murmured pleasantries, but the atmosphere was brittle, as though each smile concealed a secret. Hastings took his seat, observing the company with the keen eye of a man accustomed to Poirot's methods. At the head of the table sat Reginald Ashbourne, a handsome man of 40, his dark hair graying at the temples, his manner affable but strained. Beside him was his wife Clara, a delicate woman with a nervous laugh and a habit of twisting her pearl necklace. Their daughter, Evelyn, a striking young woman of 22, sat with a book in her lap, her green eyes darting restlessly about the room. She had the air of someone who longed to be elsewhere. Across from them was Dr. Lionel Grayson, the family physician, a wiry man in his 50s with a pinched face and a habit of tapping his teaspoon against his saucer. His wife, Beatrice, a former actress whose flamboyant gestures clashed with the room's restraint, chatted animatedly with the final guest, Mr. Victor Crane, a solicitor from London. Crane, a stout man with a florid complexion, seemed ill at ease. his eyes frequently straying to the grandfather clock in the corner, which ticked with relentless precision. The conversation turned to the estate's history, with Lady Margaret recounting tales of her late husband's triumphs in trade. Yet Hastings noticed undercurrents of unease. Clara's forced smile as Reginald mentioned a recent business venture, Evelyn's sharp glance at her grandmother, and Dr. Grayson's abrupt silence when the topic of Sir Henry's will arose. The solicitor, Crane, was particularly evasive, deflecting questions about his presence with vague references to legal matters. As tea drew to a close, Lady Margaret rose, her silk gown rustling. "We shall reconvene for dinner at 8, she announced. "I trust you will all find the evening illuminating." Hastings lingered in the drawing room, noting the layout of the manor. The main staircase led to a gallery of bedrooms, each assigned to a guest. A library, study, and conservatory branched off the ground floor, while French doors opened onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. A map of the estate framed in the hall caught his eye, detailing the maze-like paths of the grounds. He made a mental note to share this with Poirot, should his friend's presence prove necessary. As he strolled toward his room to dress for dinner, Hastings overheard a heated exchange in the library. Peering through the half-open door, he saw Evelyn confronting her father, Reginald. "You cannot keep pretending everything is fine," she hissed, her voice low but fierce. "If you don't tell her tonight, I will." Reginald's reply was sharp. "Mind your place, Evelyn. This is not your decision to make." Hastings withdrew, his curiosity piqued. What secret could provoke such intensity? He resolved to observe the family closely at dinner, sensing that Blackthorn Manor held more than ancestral pride within its walls. Dinner was a formal affair, served in the dining room beneath a chandelier that cast flickering shadows. The meal, consommé, roast pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, was exquisite. Yet the conversation faltered. Clara spoke little, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Beatrice Grayson's attempts at levity fell flat. Victor Crane, seated beside Hastings, seemed preoccupied, checking his pocket watch at precisely 8:47 p.m. and noting the time aloud, a detail Hastings found oddly precise. As the clock struck 9, a piercing scream shattered the silence. The guests froze, forks suspended, as Lady Margaret rose, her face pale. "That came from the library," she said, her voice trembling. Hastings followed the others as they rushed down the hall. The library door stood ajar, revealing a grim scene. Victor Crane lay slumped over the desk, a letter opener buried in his chest, blood pooling on the blotter. His pocket watch, still ticking, lay beside him, its hands frozen at 9:02 p.m. Clara gasped, clutching Reginald's arm, while Evelyn stood rigid, her face unreadable. Dr. Grayson knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse, but he shook his head. "He's dead," he said gravely. "Stabbed, and not long ago." Lady Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. "No one leaves this house," she declared. "We must send for the police, and someone fetch Captain Hastings' friend, Monsieur Poirot. I have heard of his reputation. If anyone can unravel this horror, it is he." Hastings nodded, his heart racing. The game was afoot, and he knew that Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous mind and unerring instinct, would soon bring order to the chaos of Blackthorn Manor. But as he looked at the faces around him, each one a mask of shock, fear, or calculation, he wondered what secrets lay buried in their hearts, waiting to be uncovered by the little gray cells of the great detective. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Murder. The library of Blackthorn Manor, so recently a haven of leather-bound volumes and quiet contemplation, now bore the grim weight of death. Victor Crane's body remained slumped over the desk, the letter opener glinting cruelly in the lamplight. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, and the assembled guests stood frozen, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings, his soldiers' instincts alert, surveyed the scene, noting every detail as he awaited the arrival of Hercule Poirot. Lady Margaret Ashbourne, her composure strained but intact, took charge with the authority of a woman accustomed to command. "We must secure the room," she declared, her voice steady despite the pallor of her cheeks. "No one is to touch anything until the police arrive. Reginald, send for them at once." Reginald Ashbourne nodded, his face ashen, and hurried toward the telephone in the hall. Clara, his wife, clung to his arm, her eyes wide with panic, while Evelyn, their daughter, stood apart, her gaze fixed on the body with an intensity that unsettled Hastings. Dr. Lionel Grayson, having confirmed Crane's death, rose from his crouch, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. His wife, Beatrice, let out a theatrical sob, clutching a handkerchief to her face, though her eyes remained dry. Hastings stepped closer to the body, careful not to disturb the scene. The letter opener, an ornate silver piece with an ivory handle, was embedded deeply in Crane's chest, suggesting a blow delivered with force. The solicitor's pocket watch, still ticking faintly, lay open on the desk, its hands pointing to 9:02 p.m. A half-finished letter, smeared with blood, lay beneath Crane's hand, its contents illegible save for the salutation. "My dear Lady Margaret." A glass of brandy, untouched, stood on a side table, its amber glow catching the light. Hastings made a mental note of these details, knowing Poirot would demand precision. The clock in the hall chimed 9:30, and the distant wail of a police siren broke the silence. Within moments, Inspector Grayson, no relation to the doctor, strode into the library, his burly frame filling the doorway. A local man with a reputation for dogged determination, he surveyed the scene with a frown. "Right then," he said gruffly. "Nobody leaves this house until I've got statements. Captain Hastings, you're a friend of that Belgian detective, aren't you? Where's he at?" "He will be here soon, Inspector," Hastings replied, his tone calm but firm. "Monsieur Poirot was in London when I telephoned. He is never one to delay in matters of such gravity." Inspector Grayson grunted, unimpressed, and began barking orders to his constables, who cordoned off the library. The guests were ushered to the drawing room, where they sat in uneasy silence, each avoiding the other's eyes. Hastings observed them closely, noting Clara's nervous fidgeting, Evelyn's rigid posture, and Dr. Grayson's repeated glances toward the door as if expecting an escape. Beatrice, meanwhile, launched into a melodramatic recounting of the scream that had drawn them to the library, her voice rising with each embellishment. Lady Margaret, seated in a high-backed chair, maintained an air of icy control. "This is a tragedy," she said, addressing the room. "Mr. Crane was our guest, and his death is a stain upon this house. We shall cooperate fully with the authorities." Her words were met with murmurs of assent, but Hastings detected a flicker of unease in her eyes. What did she know of Crane's purpose here? The solicitor's presence had been vaguely explained as legal matters, but his death suggested a motive far more sinister. As the police began their preliminary inquiries, Hastings slipped away to the hall, where he found Reginald pacing. "Ghastly business, Hastings," Reginald muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Crane was here about the estate, you know. Some paperwork for Mother. I can't imagine who'd do this." Hastings nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The timing of the murder puzzled him. Dinner had ended at 8:55 p.m., and the scream had come at 9 p.m. Crane's watch marked 9:02 p.m., suggesting the attack occurred within a narrow window. Who had been unaccounted for in those critical minutes? Before he could press Reginald further, a familiar figure appeared at the manor's entrance. Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a tailored suit and polished patent leather shoes, stepped into the hall, his waxed mustache gleaming under the chandelier. His green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, took in the scene with a single glance. "Mon ami Hastings," he exclaimed, his voice a blend of warmth and precision. "You find yourself once again in the midst of tragedy, n'est-ce pas? Tell me everything, and omit not the smallest detail." Hastings recounted the evening's events, from the tense dinner to the discovery of Crane's body. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted, his fingers steepled. When Hastings mentioned the letter opener and the pocket watch, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The watch, Hastings, it is precise, yes? And the letter, did you see its contents?" "Only the salutation," Hastings admitted. "It was addressed to Lady Margaret." "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured, stroking his moustache. "A solicitor, a letter, a murder, all within the walls of this grande maison. We must proceed with method, Hastings. The little gray cells, they are already at work." Poirot entered the drawing-room, where the guests sat under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye. The detective's presence was like a spark in a tinderbox. The room seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. He bowed to Lady Margaret, his manner impeccable. "Madam, I am Hercule Poirot at your service. I understand a great misfortune has befallen your household. Permit me to assist in uncovering the truth." Lady Margaret inclined her head. "We are grateful, Monsieur Poirot." "This is a dark day for Blackthorn Manor." Poirot's gaze swept over the group, lingering on each face. "A man is dead," he said softly, "and yet the truth, it hides in plain sight. I shall speak with each of you in turn, but first I must see the scene of the crime." Accompanied by Hastings and Inspector Grayson, Poirot entered the library. He moved with deliberate care, his eyes darting from the body to the desk, the brandy glass, and the blood-stained letter. He paused at the watch, noting its time, then examined the letter opener, careful not to touch it. "The weapon, it is from this room, oui?" he asked. Inspector Grayson nodded. "It's the Manor's, all right. Kept on that desk for opening correspondence." "And the letter," Poirot continued, peering at the bloodied paper. "It is incomplete, but its purpose. Ah, that is the question." He straightened, his expression unreadable. "Inspector, you will ensure the body is examined thoroughly. The angle of the wound, the force required, these will tell us much." As they returned to the drawing-room, Poirot's demeanor shifted to one of quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, addressing the assembled group, "a crime has been committed and each of you holds a piece of the puzzle. I ask only that you speak the truth, for lies, they betray themselves in time." Evelyn's eyes flickered and Clara's hands tightened on her necklace. Dr. Grayson coughed while Beatrice let out a nervous laugh. Reginald looked to his mother, who sat motionless, her face a mask of resolve. Hastings felt a chill. The murder of Victor Crane was no random act. It was a calculated blow, rooted in secrets the Ashbourne family guarded fiercely. As Poirot began his inquiries, Hastings knew the Belgian's methodical mind would unravel the threads of deception one by one, until the truth stood revealed in all its stark clarity. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The drawing-room of Blackthorn Manor, with its heavy velvet curtains and flickering firelight, seemed to close in around its occupants as Hercule Poirot began his work. The air was thick with unease, the weight of Victor Crane's murder pressing upon every heart. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the hearth, watching his friend with a mixture of admiration and anticipation. Poirot, small in stature but commanding in presence, moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his green eyes darting from face to face as he absorbed the subtle currents of tension in the room. Inspector Grayson, his notebook open and pencil poised, had begun taking statements, but his brusque manner elicited little beyond guarded replies. Poirot, however, approached the matter with a finesse that set him apart. He bowed slightly to Lady Margaret, who sat erect in her chair, her silver hair catching the glow of the chandelier. "Madame," he said, his voice smooth as polished oak, I am grateful for your permission to assist. A crime such as this, it is like a tapestry. Each thread must be examined to reveal the pattern. Lady Margaret's lips tightened, but she nodded. You do what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I only ask that this matter be resolved swiftly for the sake of my family. Poirot's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he turned to the others. Mesdames et messieurs, I shall begin by understanding the events of this evening. Each of you, I am certain, has much to contribute to the truth. Let us proceed with order and method. Hastings noted the reactions. Reginald shifted uncomfortably. Clara twisted her pearl necklace until a bead snapped free, and Evelyn's eyes narrowed, as if weighing Poirot's words. Dr. Lionel Grayson cleared his throat while his wife, Beatrice, fanned herself with a lace handkerchief. Her earlier theatrics subdued under Poirot's scrutiny. Poirot began with Reginald, who stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Monsieur Ashbourne, you invited our dear Captain Hastings to this gathering. May I ask why? Reginald hesitated, glancing at his mother. I thought it would be pleasant to have an old friend here, he said. And with Mr. Crane's visit, I felt a neutral presence might ease any tensions. Tensions? Poirot's eyebrows arched. Of what nature, if I may inquire? Reginald's jaw tightened. Family matters. The estate, you know. Father's will left certain complications. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And Monsieur Crane, he was here to address these complications? Yes, Reginald said quickly. He was father's solicitor. He came to discuss some legal documents. Poirot turned to Lady Margaret. Madame, the letter on the desk addressed to you, do you know its purpose? Lady Margaret's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. Mr. Crane had mentioned a matter concerning the estate, she said coolly. He had not yet shared the details. Poirot made a small, satisfied sound, as if a piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. He moved to Clara, whose nervous fidgeting had intensified. Madame Ashbourne, you were at dinner when the scream was heard. Where were you immediately before? Clara's eyes darted to her husband. I was in the dining room with everyone else. I stepped out briefly to fetch my shawl from the hall. It was chilly. And you saw no one? Poirot pressed gently. No one, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Poirot's gaze shifted to Evelyn, who met his eyes with a defiant tilt of her chin. Mademoiselle, you seem preoccupied. Perhaps you noticed something unusual this evening? Evelyn's lips parted, then closed. I was reading in the drawing room after tea, she said. I didn't see anything until we heard the scream and ran to the library. Poirot nodded, his attention turning to Dr. Grayson. Monsieur le Docteur, you examined the body. The wound, can you describe it? Dr. Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice clinical. A single stab to the chest, penetrating the heart. Death would have been almost instantaneous. The letter opener was driven with considerable force. And you were where at 9 o'clock? Poirot asked. In the conservatory, Grayson replied. I was inspecting Lady Margaret's orchids. I often do so after dinner, Beatrice, unprompted, chimed in. I was in the drawing room practicing my lines for a little performance I'm preparing. I didn't hear anything until that dreadful scream. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, Madame Grayson. Your accounts are most helpful. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us establish the timeline. Dinner ended at 8:55, oui? The scream was heard at 9, and Monsieur Crane's watch stopped at 9:02. A mere 7 minutes, yet within that time, a man was murdered. Inspector Grayson interjected. We've searched the library. No signs of a struggle, no footprints, no fingerprints on the letter opener yet. It's a clean job, if you'll pardon the expression, clean perhaps, Poirot said, but not without purpose. The letter opener. It is from the desk, yet it was chosen as a weapon. Why not a knife from the kitchen or a pistol? This was a crime of opportunity, or one made to appear so. Hastings, standing by the hearth, felt a familiar thrill. Poirot's mind was like a finely tuned machine, sifting through details others overlooked. He noticed Poirot pause by a small table where a silver tray held a decanter of brandy and several glasses. One glass, the one beside Crane's body, stood out for its solitude. "Inspector," Poirot said, "the brandy glass in the library, has it been examined?" "Not yet," Grayson admitted. "We're waiting for the coroner's men." Poirot nodded. "It must be tested. The smallest detail, it can reveal the greatest truth." As the interviews continued, Hastings observed a subtle shift in the room. The guests, initially shaken, now seemed to guard their words more carefully. Clara's hands trembled as she sipped her tea, and Reginald's gaze flickered toward his daughter, who avoided his eyes. Beatrice's laughter rang hollow, and Dr. Grayson's fingers tapped an impatient rhythm on his knee. Poirot concluded his initial inquiries with a polite smile. "For now, I thank you all. I shall reflect upon your words, and tomorrow we shall speak again. The truth, it is like a shy bird. It must be approached with care." As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Hastings followed Poirot to the hall. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" he asked. "There's something they're not telling us." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, you are correct. Each of them holds a piece of the truth, but they guard it jealously. The letter, the watch, the brandy glass, these are not mere objects. They are signposts to the murderer's mind. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall follow them." He paused, his expression grave. "But beware, Hastings. This is no simple crime. There is a darkness in this house, a secret that binds these people together. And it is that secret we must uncover, or more blood may yet be spilled." As they ascended the grand staircase, the manor's silence seemed to deepen, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Hastings felt a chill, knowing that Poirot's little gray cells were already weaving a net to trap a killer whose motives lay hidden in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting a pale light over the drawing room where Hercule Poirot had assembled the household. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and unease, the events of the previous night hanging over the group like a storm cloud. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his gaze drifting to the manicured gardens, but his attention was fixed on Poirot, whose meticulous presence commanded the room. The Belgian detective, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his mustache waxed to perfection, paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. Inspector Grayson had departed at dawn to oversee the coroner's examination, leaving Poirot to conduct his interviews with a precision that bordered on artistry. The guests, seated in a semicircle, wore expressions ranging from weary resignation to guarded defiance. Lady Margaret, her silver hair gleaming, sat with the dignity of a queen, though her fingers betrayed a slight tremor as they rested on her teacup. Reginald Ashbourne, his face drawn, avoided his wife Clara's anxious glances, while Evelyn, their daughter, sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her green eyes watchful. Dr. Lionel Grayson, his spectacles glinting, tapped his foot impatiently, and Beatrice, his wife, fanned herself with a silk fan, her theatrical air subdued but not extinguished. Poirot began with a disarming smile. "Mesdames et messieurs, the death of Monsieur Crane is a puzzle, and each of you holds a piece. I ask only for the truth, however small it may seem. Let us begin with the moments before the scream at 9 o'clock last night." He turned to Clara, whose nervous habit of twisting her necklace had returned. "Madame Ashbourne, you mentioned fetching your shawl from the hall. At what time precisely did you leave the dining room?" Clara hesitated, her eyes flickering to Reginald. It was just before 9, I think. Perhaps 10 minutes to. I was only gone a moment. And you passed the library? Poirot's tone was gentle, but his gaze was sharp. Yes, Clara admitted, her voice barely audible. The door was closed. I heard nothing. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle, you were in the drawing room reading, oui? Did you see your mother pass through the hall? Evelyn's jaw tightened. I wasn't watching the hall, she said coolly. I was engrossed in my book. Engrossed, Poirot repeated, his eyes gleaming. And yet, a scream pierced your concentration. Tell me, what book was it? Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. It was Wuthering Heights. I've read it before, but I find it absorbing. Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook, then addressed Dr. Grayson. Monsieur le Docteur, you were in the conservatory admiring the orchids. Did you perhaps hear or see anyone near the library? Dr. Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. I was quite focused on the plants. The conservatory is at the far end of the house. I heard nothing until the scream. And you, Madame Grayson? Poirot turned to Beatrice, who snapped her fan shut with a flourish. I was in here practicing my lines, she said, her voice tinged with indignation. I was preparing for a little recitation I planned to perform tomorrow. I didn't leave this room. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Reginald. Monsieur Ashbourne, you remained in the dining room after dinner. Did you notice anyone leave besides your wife? Reginald rubbed his temples. I was speaking with Mother about estate matters. I didn't notice anyone leave, not specifically. Lady Margaret interjected, her tone crisp. My son and I were discussing family business, Monsieur Poirot. We were quite absorbed until the scream interrupted us. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. And Monsieur Crane, he did not join you in the dining room after dinner? No, Lady Margaret said. He excused himself to the library to review some documents. He said he preferred to work alone. Alone, Poirot murmured, pacing slowly. And yet, someone joined him with fatal consequences. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Let us consider the timeline. Dinner ended at 8:55. Madame Clara left for her shawl at 10 minutes to 9. The scream was heard at 9, and Monsieur Crane's watch stopped at 9:02. A narrow window, mes amis, for a murder. Hastings, listening intently, noted the precision of Poirot's questions. Each was a probe, testing the consistency of alibis, searching for cracks in the facade of truth. He recalled the library scene, the letter opener, the bloodied letter, the brandy glass, and the watch, frozen at 9:02. Something about the watch nagged at him, but he couldn't place it. Poirot turned to Lady Margaret. Madame, the letter addressed to you, do you know why Monsieur Crane was writing it? Lady Margaret's lips thinned. As I said, he mentioned estate matters. I assumed it was a formal report on the will's provisions. Assumed, Poirot said softly. And yet the letter was unfinished, stained with blood. A curious interruption, no? Before she could respond, a constable entered, carrying a small evidence bag. Monsieur Poirot, the coroner's preliminary report, he said, handing it to the detective. Poirot scanned the document, his expression impassive. The wound was indeed fatal, delivered with force to the heart. No defensive marks, suggesting Monsieur Crane did not expect the attack. And the brandy glass, it contains no poison but traces of a sedative. Curious, non? Inspector Grayson, who had just returned, frowned. A sedative? So he was drugged first? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps the sedative was meant for someone else. We must consider all possibilities. He turned back to the group, his voice firm. I ask you now to recall the smallest details. Did you see anyone near the library? Did you hear a door, a footstep, a whisper? Silence hung heavy, broken only by Beatrice's nervous laugh. "It's all so dreadful," she said. "I swear I heard nothing but my own voice practicing." Evelyn spoke suddenly, her tone sharp. "I heard a door creak just before the scream. I thought it was the library, but I wasn't sure." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A creak, you say?" "From where, precisely?" Evelyn hesitated. "The hall, I think." Near the library door, Clara gasped, and Reginald shot his daughter a warning glance. Poirot noted the exchange but said nothing, instead making another note in his pocketbook. "Merci, mademoiselle. Every detail, it matters." As the interviews concluded, Poirot addressed the group. "I shall examine the library once more, and I ask that you remain in the manor. The truth, it is like a shadow. It moves when you least expect it." Hastings followed Poirot to the library, where the detective examined the scene with meticulous care. He studied the desk, the letter opener, and the brandy glass, his fingers hovering but never touching. "The sedative, Hastings," he said softly. "It suggests premeditation, yet the letter opener suggests impulse. A contradiction, non?" Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "And the watch? Why did it stop at 9:02? Was it broken in the attack?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The watch, mon ami, it tells more than time. It tells a story, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover it." As they left the library, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The Ashbourne family was hiding something. A secret tied to Crane's death, woven into the very walls of Blackthorn Manor. Poirot's little gray cells were at work, and Hastings knew the truth was closer than it seemed, lurking in the shadows of alibis and half-truths. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The morning at Blackthorn Manor unfolded with a deceptive calm, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows as if to mock the darkness that had settled over the household. Hercule Poirot, his eyes sharp and his manner unruffled, had taken to pacing the drawing room, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, watched his friend with a growing sense of anticipation. The murder of Victor Crane had cast a net of suspicion over the manor, and Poirot's methodical probing was beginning to stir the waters, revealing ripples of deception. Inspector Grayson, having returned from the local police station, stood by the door, his notebook bristling with scribbled observations. His investigation had taken a predictable turn. The letter opener, wiped clean of fingerprints, offered no immediate clues, and the coroner's report confirmed Poirot's earlier observation. A sedative in the brandy glass, though in a dose too small to incapacitate. The inspector, however, had latched onto a more obvious suspect, and his focus now dominated the room. "It's clear as day," Grayson declared, his voice carrying the confidence of a man unaccustomed to doubt. "The servants saw Clara Ashbourne near the library just before the scream. She admitted to fetching her shawl, and that places her at the scene. Motive? Well, Crane was meddling with the estate. Maybe she didn't like what he was digging up." Clara, seated on a velvet settee, gasped, her hands flying to her throat. "That's absurd," she cried, her voice trembling. "I was only in the hall for a moment." "I didn't even enter the library." Reginald rose, his face flushed with indignation. "Inspector, you've no right to accuse my wife without evidence." "Clara wouldn't harm a soul." Inspector Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Then explain why the hall boy Thomas saw her lingering near the library door at 5 minutes to 9. "Sounds like opportunity to me." Poirot, who had been listening in silence, raised a hand. "Un moment, Inspector. Madame Clara's presence in the hall, it is noted, but it is not proof. Let us not rush to conclusions. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It requires time to reveal its flavor." Hastings suppressed a smile. Poirot's knack for deflating hasty assumptions was unmatched. and he could see the inspector bristle, though Grayson held his tongue. Poirot turned to Clara, his expression gentle but probing. "Madame, you say you were in the hall for only a moment. Did you perhaps notice anything unusual? A sound, a shadow, a scent?" Clara's eyes darted to the floor, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. I don't recall anything specific," she said faintly. "It was all so quick." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her before shifting to the hall boy, Thomas, who had been summoned at the inspector's request. The lad, no more than 16, stood nervously by the door, his cap clutched in his hands. "Young man," Poirot said, his voice kind but firm, "you saw Madame Clara in the hall. Tell me precisely what you observed." Thomas swallowed hard. "I was polishing the banister, sir, near the library. I saw Mrs. Ashbourne come out of the dining room, fetch her shawl from the stand, and walk toward the stairs. She stopped for a bit, looking at the library door like she was thinking of going in." "And then?" Poirot prompted. "She didn't go in," Thomas said quickly. "She just stood there a moment, then went upstairs. That's when I heard the scream a minute or two later." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Thomas. Your observation is most helpful." He turned to the group, his tone measured. "We have a timeline, Madame Clara was in the hall at 5 minutes to 9. The scream was heard at 9. The murder, it occurred within this window. But let us not be swayed by the obvious," Inspector Grayson snorted. "Obvious or not, she's the one who was there." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The obvious, Inspector, is often a distraction. A red herring, as you English say. Let us consider others who were unaccounted for." He turned to Beatrice Grayson, whose fan snapped shut with a click. "Madame, you were practicing your lines in this very room. Did you perhaps step into the hall at any point?" Beatrice's eyes widened, her voice rising in protest. "Certainly not. I was here the whole time, perfecting my delivery of Lady Macbeth. Ask anyone." Evelyn, who had been silent, spoke up sharply. "I was here too, and I didn't see you leave, Beatrice. But you were awfully loud. It's a wonder you heard the scream at all." Beatrice flushed, her fan fluttering again. "I heard it perfectly well, thank you." It was quite piercing. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Grayson, who sat rigidly beside his wife. "Monsieur le Docteur, the conservatory is some distance from the library. Yet you arrived quickly after the scream. Were you perhaps closer than you said?" Dr. Grayson's jaw tightened. "I was in the conservatory as I told you. I ran when I heard the scream. It's not so far if you're quick." Poirot made a small note in his pocketbook, his expression unreadable. Hastings, watching closely, noted the subtle interplay of glances among the family. Reginald's eyes flickered toward his mother, Lady Margaret, who sat impassive, her hands folded in her lap. Evelyn's gaze lingered on her father, a mix of defiance and concern in her eyes. The room was a web of secrets, and Poirot was tugging at its threads. The detective paused, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us consider the brandy glass, mes amis. A sedative was found, yet Monsieur Crane was not incapacitated. Why then was it there? Was it meant for him or for another? And the letter addressed to Madame Margaret, why was it left unfinished?" Lady Margaret's voice was cool. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I don't know its contents." Mr. Crane was to discuss estate matters, nothing more. Poirot nodded, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "We shall see, madam. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself." As the morning wore on, Poirot requested a tour of the manor's ground floor, accompanied by Hastings and Inspector Grayson. They moved through the library, where Crane's body had been removed, but the blood-stained desk remained. Poirot examined the room with meticulous care. noting the position of the furniture, the angle of the desk, and the French doors leading to the terrace. He paused by the brandy decanter, sniffing it delicately. "No sedative here," he murmured. "The glass alone was tampered with. Interesting, none?" Hastings pointed to the terrace doors. Could someone have entered from outside? Poirot shook his head. The doors were locked and the key was in the library. No signs of forced entry. The murderer, he was already inside. They moved to the hall where Poirot studied the map of the estate Hastings had noticed earlier. His finger traced the paths leading to the gardens and the maze beyond. "A closed circle, Hastings," he said softly. "The manor, it is our world, and within it lies the answer." As they returned to the drawing room, Hastings felt the weight of Poirot's words. The inspector's focus on Clara was a distraction, a red herring that obscured the deeper truth. Someone in this house had planned Crane's death, and the clues, the sedative, the letter, the watch, pointed to a motive buried in the Ashbourne family's secrets. Poirot's little gray cells were at work, and Hastings knew that the net was tightening, even as the true killer hid behind a mask of innocence. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows of Blackthorn Manor, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished oak floors. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood before the library's French doors, his green eyes narrowed in thought. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever his loyal companion, stood nearby, watching as Poirot's meticulous mind sifted through the fragments of the mystery surrounding Victor Crane's murder. The air in the manor was heavy with suspicion, and the weight of unspoken truths pressed upon every occupant. Inspector Grayson, frustrated by the lack of fingerprints on the letter opener and the inconclusive coroner's report, had retreated to the village to confer with his superiors, leaving Poirot to continue his investigation unhindered. The detective had requested privacy in the library, and now, with only Hastings present, he began to examine the scene with a precision that bordered on reverence. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but deliberate. "The smallest detail, it can be the key to the entire puzzle. Observe and tell me what you see." Hastings surveyed the room, his eyes tracing the familiar scene. The desk, still stained with Crane's blood. The brandy glass, now in police custody, but its position marked by a chalk outline. The letter, its contents obscured by crimson, and the pocket watch stopped at 9:02 p.m. He frowned, recalling Poirot's earlier interest in the watch. "The watch, Poirot," he said. "It stopped at 9:02, but you said it wasn't broken. Could it have been deliberately stopped?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, Hastings. You begin to think like Poirot. The watch, it is not damaged, yet it stopped at the moment of death. Why? Let us examine it closely." He retrieved the watch from the evidence bag, handling it with gloved hands provided by the police. The silver case was unblemished, its crystal intact. Poirot opened it, revealing a delicate mechanism still ticking faintly when wound. "The watch was stopped manually," he said. "A gentle press of the stem and it halts. This is no accident, Hastings. Someone wished to mark the time of death, or to mislead us." Hastings' brow furrowed. But why stop the watch? The scream was heard at 9, so the murder happened around then. What's the point? Poirot smiled enigmatically. "The point, mon ami, is to create a narrative. The murderer wishes us to believe the crime occurred at 9:02, but perhaps it was earlier, or later. We must verify the alibis against this moment." Poirot moved to the desk, his attention drawn to the bloodied letter. He peered at it through a small magnifying glass, careful not to disturb the evidence. "The salutation, 'My dear Lady Margaret,' is clear, but the rest is obscured. Yet look here, Hastings, a single word visible beneath the stain. Inheritance." "Inheritance?" Hastings echoed, his mind racing. So Crane was writing about the estate, as Lady Margaret said. Could the murder be tied to Sir Henry's will? Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone cautious, but we must not assume. The word inheritance is a clue, but to what? A motive, a warning, or a distraction? He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the room. His eyes settled on a small, overlooked detail. A single orchid petal, pale purple, lying near the base of the desk. Poirot knelt, retrieving it with a pair of tweezers. Curieux, he murmured. Dr. Grayson spoke of admiring orchids in the conservatory. Yet here is a petal, far from its home. Hastings frowned. Could it have been tracked in on someone's shoe? Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings. The petal is fresh, uncrushed. It fell here recently, perhaps during the murder. And the conservatory, it is not on the direct path from the dining room to the library. He placed the petal in a small envelope, his expression thoughtful. This petal, it is a contradiction. Doctor, Grayson claims he was in the conservatory, yet this suggests he, or someone else, was here. They moved to the French doors, which Poirot examined with care. The lock was intact, the key still in place. No entry from outside, he confirmed. The murderer was within the manor. But this petal, it points to a presence we have not yet accounted for. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot summoned Dr. Grayson for a private interview. The physician, his face pale, entered with a wary expression. Monsieur le Docteur, Poirot began, holding up the envelope. This petal, it is from an orchid, oui? You are an enthusiast of such flowers, are you not? Grayson nodded, his fingers adjusting his spectacles. Yes, Lady Margaret's collection is remarkable. I was studying them last night, as I said. And yet, Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, this petal was found in the library near the body. How do you explain this? Grayson's eyes widened, a flush creeping up his neck. I must have carried it on my clothing. I often visit the conservatory. It's possible, Poirot repeated, his tone neutral. But not probable, monsieur. The petal is fresh, not wilted. It fell recently. Were you in the library last night, despite your claim? Grayson's hands clenched. I told you I was in the conservatory. I didn't enter the library until after the scream. Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a polite smile. Merci, monsieur. We shall speak again. As Grayson left, Hastings leaned in. Do you think he's lying, Poirot? That petal places him at the scene. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The petal, it is a clue, but not yet the truth. It suggests a presence, but whose? Dr. Grayson or another who visited the conservatory? We must dig deeper, Hastings. They returned to the drawing room where the other guests awaited, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Poirot addressed them collectively. Mesdames et messieurs, a small detail has emerged. A petal found in the library. It speaks of someone's presence, someone who may have seen more than they admit. I ask you now, who among you visited the conservatory last night? Silence greeted his words, broken only by Beatrice's nervous laugh. The conservatory? I wouldn't go near those stuffy flowers, they make me sneeze. Evelyn spoke up, her voice steady. I walked through the conservatory yesterday afternoon, but not last night. I was in the drawing room, as I said. Reginald and Clara shook their heads, and Lady Margaret's expression remained impassive. I rarely visit the conservatory, she said. My orchids are Dr. Grayson's domain. Poirot's gaze lingered on each face, searching for a telltale flicker. Very well, he said. The petal. It is a small thing, but it speaks. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall listen. As the group dispersed, Hastings felt a chill. The petal was a subtle clue, but its implications were profound. Someone had been in the library, someone who had not admitted it. The watch, the letter, the petal. These were threads in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was weaving them together with relentless precision. The truth Hastings knew was drawing closer, hidden in the contradictions of Blackthorn Manor's inhabitants. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The atmosphere in Blackthorn Manor had grown taut as a violin string, each passing hour tightening the tension among its inhabitants. The murder of Victor Crane lingered like a shadow, and Hercule Poirot's relentless probing had begun to unravel the carefully woven fabric of the Ashbourne family's secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the drawing-room, felt the weight of unspoken truths as he watched Poirot, whose calm demeanor belied the storm brewing in his little gray cells. The afternoon had waned, and the household gathered once more, their faces etched with weariness and suspicion. Poirot, his suit immaculate and his mustache perfectly symmetrical, stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. The orchid petal, the stopped watch, and the bloodied letter had sharpened his focus, and now he sought to expose the deeper motives lurking beneath the surface. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding. "A crime such as this, it is not born of impulse alone. It is rooted in the heart, in jealousy, greed, or fear. Today we shall uncover what drives such passions in Blackthorn Manor." He turned to Reginald Ashbourne, whose haggard appearance betrayed sleepless nights. "Monsieur Ashbourne, you spoke of complications with your father's will. Tell me, what was Monsieur Crane's role in these matters?" Reginald shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his mother, Lady Margaret, who sat with her usual regal composure. "Crane was father's solicitor," he said. "He was reviewing the estate's finances. There were discrepancies in the accounts, and he was to report them to mother." "Discrepancies?" Poirot's eyebrows arched. "Of what nature?" Reginald hesitated, his voice low. "Father's shipping business wasn't as profitable as he claimed. There were debts, large ones. Crane was investigating whether funds had been misallocated." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara's hands tightened on her necklace, and Evelyn's eyes flashed with something akin to anger. Lady Margaret's expression remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened on the arms of her chair. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara. "Madame, you seem distressed. Did you know of these debts?" Clara's lips trembled. I knew Reginald was worried about money, but I didn't know the details." "He never told me much." Reginald's face reddened. "I didn't want to burden her," he snapped. "It was my responsibility to handle." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And yet Monsieur Crane's letter addressed to Madame Margaret mentioned inheritance. Was this connected to the debts or something more?" Lady Margaret spoke, her voice cool. "Mr. Crane was to clarify the terms of my late husband's will. The estate's finances were complex, and he was ensuring everything was in order." Poirot's smile was polite but piercing. "And yet he was murdered before he could deliver this clarity. Curious, non?" Before she could respond, Evelyn rose abruptly, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. You're all dancing around the truth. Father, tell them about the argument." Reginald's eyes widened. "Evelyn, hold your tongue." "No," Evelyn snapped, her cheeks flushed. "I heard you and Mr. Crane in the study 2 days ago. You were shouting about money, about how he was going to ruin us." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Hastings, watching closely, saw Clara's face pale, while Beatrice Grayson let out a dramatic gasp. Dr. Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his expression unreadable. Poirot turned to Reginald, his tone deceptively mild. "Is this true, monsieur?" "You argued with the victim?" Reginald's shoulders slumped. "Yes," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "Crane said the debts could force us to sell part of the estate. I was angry. He was so smug about it, but I didn't kill him." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Anger. It is a powerful motive, but let us explore further. He turned to Dr. Grayson, whose nervous tapping had resumed. Monsieur le Docteur, you have been most quiet. As the family physician, you must know much of their private affairs. Did you know of these financial troubles? Dr. Grayson's lips tightened. I'm a doctor, not a banker. I knew Sir Henry's health was poor before he died, but I wasn't privy to his finances. And yet, Poirot said, holding up the envelope containing the orchid petal, this petal places you or someone in the library. You have not explained it satisfactorily. Grayson's flush deepened. I told you it must have come from my clothing. I handle orchids often. Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice, whose fan fluttered rapidly. Madame Grayson, you are close to the family. Have you heard whispers of these debts or perhaps other secrets? Beatrice laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you make it sound so sinister. I'm just a guest here, enjoying Lady Margaret's hospitality. I don't meddle in their affairs. Poirot's smile was thin. And yet, madam, you were practicing your lines so loudly that you claim to have heard nothing. A curious contrast, no? Beatrice's fan froze, and she looked away. Poirot paced slowly, his voice taking on a rhythmic cadence. We have debts, an argument, a petal, and a letter. These are not isolated threads, mes amis. They weave a tapestry of motive. Someone in this house feared what Monsieur Crane would reveal. He paused, his eyes locking onto Evelyn. Mademoiselle, you spoke of an argument. Did you hear anything else that night? Perhaps near the library? Evelyn hesitated, her defiance faltering. I heard voices, low ones, just before dinner. I couldn't make out the words, but they were coming from the study. I thought it was Father and Mr. Crane again. Reginald's face darkened. You're mistaken, Evelyn. I was with Mother in the dining room before dinner. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet Mademoiselle's memory is clear. Voices in the study before dinner. This is a contradiction we must resolve. Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. Poirot was peeling back layers, exposing lies and half-truths. The financial troubles, the argument, the mysterious voices, all pointed to a deeper motive. But whose? Reginald's anger was palpable, but Clara's nervousness and Evelyn's defiance suggested they too held secrets. Poirot addressed the group. I thank you for your candor, such as it is, but know this. The truth, it cannot hide forever. The little gray cells, they are patient, and they will find what you conceal. As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the hall, where the detective paused by the estate map. The study, Hastings, he said softly. It is near the library. We must examine it. Voices were heard, and they may hold the key. They entered the study, a small room lined with books and a heavy oak desk. Poirot's eyes scanned the space, settling on a crumpled piece of paper in the wastebasket. He retrieved it, smoothing it out to reveal a draft of a letter in Crane's handwriting. The terms of the will must be amended. The discrepancies cannot be ignored. Poirot's expression was grave. This, Hastings, is no mere financial matter. It is a motive for murder. And someone in this house knew it. As they left the study, the manor's silence seemed to deepen, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Hastings knew that Poirot's net was tightening, and the lies surfacing in Blackthorn Manor were leading them closer to a truth that promised to be as shocking as it was inevitable. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. The evening shadows lengthened across the lawns of Blackthorn Manor, enveloping the estate in a veil of twilight that mirrored the gloom settling over its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, his keen mind a whirlwind of deductions, had spent the afternoon in quiet contemplation, piecing together the fragments of motive and opportunity that had emerged from the day's revelations. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room with a cup of tea grown cold, observed his friend with a mixture of awe and impatience. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the strain was beginning to tell on the Ashbourne family. Poirot had requested a private gathering after supper, insisting that the time had come for deeper truths to surface. The guests assembled reluctantly, their faces drawn and eyes averted. Lady Margaret presided at the head of the room, her silver hair catching the lamplight, but even her formidable composure showed cracks. A slight tremor in her hand as she lifted her glass of sherry. Reginald paced by the window, his usual affability replaced by a brooding silence. Clara sat huddled in a corner armchair, her eyes red-rimmed, while Evelyn perched on the edge of her seat, her gaze defiant yet shadowed with unease. Dr. Grayson and Beatrice completed the circle, the former tapping his fingers restlessly, the latter fanning herself with exaggerated vigor. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice a calm anchor in the turbulent atmosphere. We have uncovered much. Debts that threaten the estate, arguments that reveal tempers, and clues that point to hidden presences. But these are but the surface. The heart of this crime lies in the emotions that bind you all. Love, betrayal, fear. I ask you now to reflect upon your consciences. The truth, it will not remain buried. His words hung in the air, met with a heavy silence broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. Hastings watched closely, noting the subtle shifts. Clara's gaze flickering toward her husband, Evelyn's hands clenching into fists. Dr. Grayson's Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. It was Clara who broke first. A sob escaped her lips, muffled by her handkerchief, and she rose unsteadily, her delicate frame trembling. I can't bear it any longer, she whispered, her voice cracking. The lies, the suspicion. It's too much. Reginald moved toward her, his face a mask of concern. Clara, my dear, you mustn't. No, Reginald, she cried, pulling away. We've hidden it for too long. Monsieur Poirot, you must know the truth, at least part of it. Victor Crane. He wasn't just here for the estate's finances. He knew about my affair. A gasp rippled through the room. Hastings' eyes widened, and Poirot's expression remained impassive, though his eyes gleamed with interest. Lady Margaret's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor, but she made no move to retrieve it. An affair? Poirot prompted gently, his tone encouraging rather than accusatory. With whom? Madame? Clara's tears flowed freely now, her composure shattered. With Dr. Grayson, she confessed, her voice barely audible. It began last year when Reginald was away on business. Lionel, Dr. Grayson, was so kind, so attentive. But it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. We ended it months ago, but Crane found out. He had letters, evidence. He was going to expose us unless we paid him. Dr. Grayson's face drained of color, and he half rose from his chair. Clara, no, you promised we'd never speak of it. I have to, Clara sobbed. Don't you see? The inspector thinks I killed him because I was in the hall. But I was there because I wanted to confront Crane, to beg him to destroy those letters. I heard voices in the library, angry ones. I hesitated, then went upstairs. That's when the scream came. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Grayson. Monsieur le Docteur, this affair, it gives you both a motive. Crane's blackmail threatened your reputations, your marriages. Did you perhaps visit the library to silence him? Grayson shook his head vehemently, his voice hoarse. I swear I didn't kill him. I knew about the blackmail. Crane approached me too, demanding money I didn't have. But I was in the conservatory, as I said. The petal. It must have come from earlier in the day. Beatrice, who had been silent, let out a sharp laugh that bordered on hysteria. You fool, Lionel. I knew about your dalliance with Clara. Do you think I'm blind? But blackmail. This is madness, Poirot interjected smoothly. Madame Grayson, your knowledge of the affair, is it possible you acted to protect your husband or perhaps yourself? Beatrice's fan snapped shut. Protect him? From his own stupidity? I wouldn't stoop to murder for that. Evelyn, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. Mother, how could you? And with him? She gestured toward Dr. Grayson, her face a mix of hurt and anger. Clara turned to her daughter, her eyes pleading. Evelyn, darling, forgive me. It was over before you knew, but Crane, he threatened to tell everyone, including you. I couldn't let that happen. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. This revelation, Madame Clara, it is most illuminating. Blackmail, it is a powerful motive. The letters you mentioned, where are they now? Clara wiped her tears. Crane kept them in his briefcase, I think. He showed me one, but I don't know where the rest are. Poirot nodded. We must search for them. Inspector Grayson will assist, but first let us consider the voices you heard, madam. Angry voices in the library. Who was with Crane? I couldn't tell, Clara said, her voice faltering. They were muffled, but one sounded like a man's, deep and harsh. Reginald, who had sunk into a chair, his face buried in his hands, looked up. It wasn't me, he muttered. I was with Mother, as I said. Lady Margaret's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. Enough of this. Clara, you've said your piece. Monsieur Poirot, surely this changes nothing. An affair is scandalous, but it doesn't prove murder. Poirot's eyes met hers, a spark of challenge in his gaze. Au contraire, madame, it changes much. Blackmail ties the crime to personal ruin, not just financial. And the voices, they suggest Crane was not alone before his death. Hastings, his heart pounding, saw the impact of Clara's confession. The room was a cauldron of emotions, betrayal, shame, relief at the partial truth revealed. But Poirot's expression told him that this was only a fragment of the puzzle. The detective's little gray cells were processing, connecting the affair to the debts, the petal, the stopped watch. As the gathering dispersed, Clara supported by Reginald, Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the emotional dam has broken and the waters flow. But notice, Hastings, the truth she revealed is partial. There is more, much more, hidden in the depths. They retired to the library where Poirot examined Crane's briefcase, now under police seal but accessible with the inspector's permission. Inside, among legal documents, were several envelopes tied with string. Poirot opened one carefully, revealing a letter in Clara's handwriting, intimate and incriminating. Here is the proof, Poirot said softly. But why did Crane blackmail them? A solicitor of repute, this suggests desperation, or perhaps a deeper involvement in the estate's troubles. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. Clara's breakdown had exposed a web of infidelity and extortion, but the murderer remained elusive. As the night deepened, the manor's secrets seemed to pulse in the shadows, waiting for Poirot's unerring logic to bring them fully into the light. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The air in Blackthorn Manor seemed to hum with tension, as if the very walls anticipated the next revelation in the unraveling mystery of Victor Crane's murder. Hercule Poirot, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the chase, had spent the morning poring over the incriminating letters found in Crane's briefcase, each one a testament to Clara Ashbourne's indiscretion and the solicitor's ruthless blackmail. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched the gathering clouds outside, a fitting metaphor for the storm Poirot was about to unleash. The detective had summoned the household for what he called a little experiment, his tone deceptively mild as he arranged the group in the drawing-room. Lady Margaret sat at the head, her composure strained but intact, her gray eyes wary. Reginald and Clara sat close together, their hands clasped, a fragile unity in the wake of her confession. Evelyn, her face pale but resolute, avoided her mother's gaze while Dr. Lionel Grayson fidgeted with his spectacles, his wife Beatrice fanning herself with a nervous energy that bordered on theatrical. Inspector Grayson, back from the village, stood by the door, his notebook at the ready, his skepticism of Poirot's methods thinly veiled. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. We have uncovered much. Debts that threaten the estate, an affair that invited blackmail, and clues that point to hidden presences in the library. But the truth, it is like a shy bird. It requires a trap to be caught. Tonight we shall set that trap. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Hastings, familiar with Poirot's methods, felt a thrill of anticipation. The detective was about to apply psychological pressure, to provoke a reaction that would reveal the killer's hand. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us reconstruct the night of the murder. Dinner ended at 8:55. Madame Clara left for her shawl at 10 minutes to 9, passing the library. Mademoiselle Evelyn heard a door creak and voices were heard in the study earlier that evening. At 9, a scream echoed through the manor, and Monsieur Crane was found dead. His watch stopped at 9:02, a letter opener in his heart, and a brandy glass laced with a sedative nearby. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But there is a contradiction, mes amis. The watch, it was stopped deliberately, yet the scream suggests the murder occurred at 9. Why this discrepancy? And the petal, found in the library. How did it arrive there if Monsieur le Docteur was in the conservatory? Dr. Grayson's face reddened. I've told you it must have come from my clothing earlier in the day. Poirot's smile was thin. Perhaps. But let us consider another possibility. The petal, the sedative, the stopped watch. These are not random. They are part of a performance designed to mislead. And I, Hercule Poirot, do not like to be misled. He turned to Clara, whose eyes widened. Madame, your confession of the affair was brave but incomplete. You heard angry voices in the library before the scream. Were they familiar to you? Clara's hands trembled. I couldn't be sure. One sounded like a man, but I didn't recognize it. Poirot nodded, then addressed Evelyn. Mademoiselle, you spoke of voices in the study earlier that evening. Could they have been the same voices your mother heard later? Evelyn's jaw tightened. I don't know. I only heard them briefly. They were arguing about money. I think Poirot's eyes gleamed. Money, blackmail, inheritance. These are the threads of our tapestry. But there is one thread that does not fit. He produced the crumpled letter from the study, holding it up for all to see. This draft found in the study speaks of amending the will. Monsieur Crane was not merely auditing accounts. He was altering the future of this estate. Who stood to lose from such changes? Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. Monsieur Poirot, you overstep. My husband's will was settled years ago. Mr. Crane's task was routine. Routine. Poirot's tone was deceptively soft. Yet he was murdered, madam, and the word inheritance in his final letter suggests otherwise. Reginald rose, his voice strained. If you're implying one of us killed him to protect our inheritance, you're wrong. I argued with Crane, yes, but I didn't want him dead. Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice, who snapped her fan shut. Madame Grayson, you knew of your husband's affair. Did you know of Crane's blackmail as well? Beatrice's laugh was brittle. I knew Lionel was a fool, but blackmail? I had no part in that. Poirot paced, his voice rising slightly. Let us imagine a scenario. Monsieur Crane, armed with secrets, threatens to expose an affair unless paid. He also uncovers financial irregularities that could ruin the estate. Someone, fearing ruin or disgrace, decides he must be silenced. A sedative is placed in his brandy, but it is not enough. A letter opener conveniently at hand becomes the weapon. The watch is stopped to fix the time of death, but the scream complicates matters. Who screamed and why? He paused, letting the question hang. Hastings saw Clara's face pale, Evelyn's eyes narrow, and Dr. Grayson's fingers freeze mid-tap. Beatrice's fan fluttered erratically, and Lady Margaret's lips tightened. "I propose," Poirot continued, "that we reenact the moment of the scream. Let us return to our positions at 8:55. Madame Clara, you will walk to the hall. Mademoiselle Evelyn, remain here. Monsieur Reginald and Madame Margaret stay in the dining room. Monsieur le Docteur to the conservatory. Madame Beatrice, continue your recitation. I shall observe." The group hesitated, but Poirot's authority was undeniable. They dispersed to their assigned places, with Hastings accompanying Poirot to the hall. Clara, her steps faltering, retraced her path to the shawl stand, pausing near the library door. Evelyn sat in the drawing room, her book unopened. Reginald and Lady Margaret stood in the dining room, their voices low. Dr. Grayson entered the conservatory while Beatrice's voice reciting Shakespeare echoed faintly. At precisely 9 o'clock, Poirot signaled for silence. The manor was still, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Then a sharp creak broke the quiet, the library door slightly ajar, moving on its hinges. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The creak, mes amis." Mademoiselle Evelyn heard it, and now we hear it again. Someone opened that door before the scream. Clara, standing in the hall, gasped. "I didn't touch it. I swear." Before anyone could respond, a stifled cry came from the library, not a scream but a gasp of surprise. Poirot moved swiftly, flinging open the door. There by the desk stood Thomas, the hall boy, his face pale, a bundle of papers clutched in his hands. "Thomas!" Poirot exclaimed. "What do you do here?" The boy stammered. I was looking for something Mr. Crane left. He told me to fetch papers from the desk yesterday, but I forgot." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And you chose this moment to remember?" "Non, mon petit, you are caught in the trap." "Those papers, what are they?" Thomas, trembling, handed over the bundle. More letters, some in Crane's hand, others in an unfamiliar script. Poirot scanned them, his expression grave. "These are not mere letters, Hastings. They are proof of a deeper conspiracy." As the group gathered in the library, Thomas's confession poured forth. Crane had paid him to spy on the family, to report on their movements. The boy had overheard arguments, seen letters exchanged, but swore he knew nothing of the murder. Poirot's voice was firm. "You have given us a piece of the truth, Thomas. But the trap, it has caught more than you. Someone here used you, or used Crane, to hide their own guilt." Hastings felt the net tightening. The reenactment had exposed a hidden player, but the killer remained elusive, their motives tangled in the web of blackmail, debts, and betrayal that Poirot was relentlessly unraveling. Chapter 10. The reveal. The drawing room of Blackthorn Manor was suffused with a tense stillness, as though the very air held its breath in anticipation of Hercule Poirot's final revelations. The flickering firelight cast long shadows on the walls, illuminating the strained faces of the Ashbourne family and their guests. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the hearth, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot's little experiment had shaken the household, and now the detective stood poised to unveil the truth behind Victor Crane's murder. The Belgian detective, his suit immaculate and his mustache gleaming, paced slowly before the assembled group, his green eyes alight with the clarity of a puzzle solved. Lady Margaret sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap, her gray eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension. Reginald and Clara clung to each other, their faces etched with dread, while Evelyn's defiant posture belied the nervous twitch of her fingers. Dr. Lionel Grayson adjusted his spectacles repeatedly, and Beatrice, her fan stilled for once, stared at Poirot with a mix of curiosity and fear. Inspector Grayson stood by the door, his skepticism softened by the weight of Poirot's methodical progress. Thomas, the hall boy, lingered in the corner, his head bowed after his unexpected confession. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a blend of authority and calm, "we have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, motives, and clues. Tonight, I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal the truth of Monsieur Victor Crane's murder. It is a tale of greed, betrayal, and a clever attempt to deceive the little gray cells. But the truth, it cannot hide from method and logic." He paused, letting his words settle. Hastings leaned forward, sensing the culmination of Poirot's relentless pursuit. The detective held up the bundle of letters retrieved from Thomas, his expression grave. "These letters, found in the library, confirm that Monsieur Crane was not merely a solicitor but a blackmailer. He held secrets, Madame Clara's affair with Monsieur le Docteur Grayson, and financial discrepancies that threatened the Ashbourne estate. But there is more. Much more." Poirot turned to the group, his gaze piercing. "Let us reconstruct the night of the murder with precision." Dinner ended at 8:55. Madame Clara went to the hall for her shawl, pausing near the library. Mademoiselle Evelyn heard a creak and voices in the study earlier. At 9, a scream echoed, and Monsieur Crane was found dead. His watch stopped at 9:02. A letter opener in his heart, a brandy glass with traces of a sedative nearby, and an orchid petal on the floor. He paced, his hands clasped behind his back. The clues, they tell a story. The watch stop deliberately suggested a precise time of death, yet the scream at 9 contradicts this. The sedative, too weak to kill, was a distraction. The petal, fresh and uncrushed, pointed to the conservatory. And the letter, with its single word, inheritance, revealed the heart of the motive. Poirot's eyes fixed on Lady Margaret. "Madam, you claimed Monsieur Crane was here for routine estate matters. But the draft letter in the study spoke of amending the will. Why? Because Crane had uncovered a secret that threatened your family's legacy." Lady Margaret's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot continued, turning to Reginald. "Monsieur Ashbourne, your argument with Crane revealed your fear of financial ruin. The debts, they were not merely mismanagement. They were tied to a hidden transaction one Crane was about to expose." Reginald's face paled. "I told you I didn't kill him." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, monsieur. Let us consider the petal. Monsieur le Docteur Grayson, you claimed it came from your clothing, yet it was fresh, suggesting you were in the library. But you were not the only one with access to the conservatory." He turned to Evelyn, whose eyes widened. "Mademoiselle, you admitted to visiting the conservatory earlier that day. You also heard voices in the study, and you confronted your father about his argument with Crane. You knew more than you revealed." Evelyn's voice was sharp. "I didn't kill him. I hated Crane for what he was doing to us, but I didn't touch him." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Clara. "Madame, your affair gave Crane leverage, but your presence in the hall was no coincidence. You heard voices, angry ones. You hesitated, fearing what Crane might reveal about you." Clara nodded, tears in her eyes. "I was terrified he'd ruin us." Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes remained unrelenting. "And yet, the scream. Who screamed? It was not Crane, for he was already dead. The watch stopped at 9:02 was a lie to mislead us. The murder occurred earlier, between 8:55 and 9, when the hall was quiet." He paused, turning to Beatrice. "Madame Grayson, your loud recitation was a perfect cover, was it not? You claimed to hear nothing, yet you were in the drawing room close to the hall. You knew of your husband's affair and Crane's blackmail. But you also knew something else, a secret worth killing for. Beatrice's fan fell to her lap, her face ashen. What are you implying? Poirot's smile was cold. I imply nothing, madame. I state the truth. The murderer is among us, and the clues point to one person. He turned slowly, his gaze settling on Lady Margaret. Madame Ashbourne, you are the key to this tragedy. A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Margaret's composure cracked, her eyes blazing. This is preposterous. I was in the dining room with Reginald. Poirot shook his head. Non, madame. You were not. The timeline, it betrays you. Reginald spoke of estate matters, but he was distracted and you slipped away. The petal in the library. It was from your prized orchids, which you tended that afternoon. You entered the library where Crane was writing his letter to you, revealing a truth you could not allow, that your late husband's will was fraudulent, hiding funds siphoned to protect the estate from debts. He stepped closer, his voice relentless. Crane, the blackmailer, demanded a price for his silence. You offered him brandy, laced with a sedative to calm him, but when he pressed his demands, you acted. The letter opener, so convenient on the desk, became your weapon. You stabbed him, stopped his watch to create a false timeline, and then screamed to draw the others, returning to the dining room before anyone noticed. Lady Margaret's face was a mask of fury. You have no proof! Poirot held up the draft letter. This, madame, is proof. The handwriting matches Crane's, and it details a fraud you orchestrated. Thomas, the hall boy, saw you leave the conservatory with a petal on your sleeve, which fell in the library. And the scream. It was yours. A calculated act to establish the time of death. Reginald rose, his voice trembling. Mother, tell me it's not true. Lady Margaret's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. I did it for the family, she whispered. Crane would have destroyed us, exposed the fraud, taken everything. I couldn't let him. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. The law, madame, does not forgive such acts, even for family. Inspector Grayson, you may take her. As the inspector led Lady Margaret away, her head held high despite her confession, the room dissolved into shocked murmurs. Hastings stared at Poirot, marveling at the clarity of his deductions. The petal, the watch, the letter. All had pointed to a truth hidden in plain sight. As the group dispersed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression somber. The heart, mon ami, it can drive us to desperate acts. But the little gray cells, they see what the heart conceals. The truth had been revealed, and Blackthorn Manor would never be the same. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The fire in the drawing room of Blackthorn Manor had burned low, its embers casting a faint glow over the now quiet space. The revelations of the evening had left the household in a state of stunned silence, the weight of Lady Margaret's confession settling like dust after a storm. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, stood by the French windows gazing out at the darkened gardens, his small frame silhouetted against the moonlight. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in an armchair with a glass of untouched brandy, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and melancholy. The resolution of Victor Crane's murder had been a triumph of logic, yet it left a bitter aftertaste. The other occupants of the manor had dispersed to their rooms, their faces etched with shock and sorrow. Reginald and Clara had retreated together, their marriage strained but perhaps salvageable in the face of shared grief. Evelyn, her defiance softened by the truth, had lingered only briefly, her eyes red from unshed tears. Dr. Grayson and Beatrice, their own secrets exposed, had withdrawn in silence, while Inspector Grayson had escorted Lady Margaret to the village, where she awaited formal charges. The hall boy's confession, though minor in comparison, had added a final thread to the tapestry of deceit Poirot had unraveled. Hastings rose, joining Poirot at the window. "You did it again, old chap," he said softly. You saw through the lies, the distractions, all of it. But I confess I never suspected Lady Margaret until the very end. Poirot turned, his green eyes reflective in the dim light. Mon ami, the heart of this crime was not in the act itself, but in the why. Lady Margaret, she was a woman of pride, of duty to her family. To her, the estate was not merely stone and land. It was the legacy of her husband, her children, her name. When Monsieur Crane threatened to expose the fraud, to tear down all she had preserved, she acted not out of greed, but out of fear for her family's ruin. Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the clues. The orchid petal, the stopped watch, the letter with its damning word. Inheritance. The petal was the key, wasn't it? He asked. It placed her in the library, despite her alibi. Oui, Hastings, Poirot replied, his voice tinged with a rare melancholy. The petal, it was a careless mistake, a whisper of truth in a sea of deception. But it was the psychology, mon ami, that revealed her. The scream, so calculated yet so desperate. The watch, stopped to mislead. The sedative, a half measure to avoid suspicion. She wove a clever web, but the little gray cells, they see the pattern where others see only chaos. Hastings sipped his brandy, the warmth doing little to ease the chill of the evening's events. And the fraud in the will, what was it exactly? You never fully explained. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The details, they are for the courts, but I shall summarize. Sir Henry, before his death, had hidden funds in secret accounts to shield the estate from creditors. Lady Margaret continued this deception, falsifying records to maintain the illusion of wealth. Crane, as the solicitor, discovered this and saw an opportunity, not only to blackmail Clara and Dr. Grayson, but to extort Lady Margaret for his silence. His letter, had it been completed, would have exposed her fraud, forcing the sale of Blackthorn Manor. Hastings shook his head. So she killed him to protect it all. But at what cost? Her family shattered, the estate's future uncertain. Poirot's expression grew somber. The cost of pride, Hastings, is often the highest. Lady Margaret believed she acted for her family, but in truth she acted for herself, for the image she could not bear to lose. It is a tragedy, non? The human heart, it drives us to such extremes. He turned back to the window, his voice softening. In my work, I seek order, method, the triumph of reason over chaos. Yet each time I am reminded that the heart, it defies reason. It loves, it hates, it fears, and sometimes it kills. This is the lesson of Blackthorn Manor, Hastings. We solve the crime, but we cannot solve the soul. Hastings felt a pang of empathy for his friend. Poirot's brilliance was unmatched, yet each case left its mark, a reminder of the frailties he sought to understand. Will you stay on, Poirot? The family might need guidance after all this. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami, my work here is done. The truth is revealed, the guilty are in the hands of justice. Tomorrow we return to London. The Ashbournes, they must face their future without Hercule Poirot. He adjusted his tie, a small gesture of restoring order to his world. But first, a cup of tisane. The Manor's coffee. It is an affront to civilization. Hastings chuckled, the tension easing slightly. You never change, Poirot. Even in the face of murder, it's the small things that bother you most. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The small things, Hastings, they are the key to everything. A petal, a watch, a word. They tell the story the heart tries to hide. As they left the drawing room, the manor seemed quieter, its secrets laid bare. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked on, marking the passage of time in a house forever changed. Poirot, his steps light but purposeful, led the way to the guest quarters, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, the next truth waiting to be uncovered. Hastings followed, grateful for the clarity of his friend's logic. but haunted by the human cost of the secrets that had torn Blackthorn Manor apart. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The morning light crept softly into Blackthorn Manor, its gentle rays doing little to dispel the pall of sorrow that lingered in the wake of Lady Margaret's confession. The grand estate, once a symbol of unyielding pride, now seemed diminished, its halls echoing with the weight of secrets laid bare. Captain Arthur Hastings, packing his suitcase in the guest room, felt a heaviness in his chest. The resolution of Victor Crane's murder had been a triumph for Hercule Poirot, yet the cost to the Ashbourne family was profound, their unity fractured by betrayal and loss. Poirot, ever meticulous, was already dressed in his impeccable suit, his waxed mustache gleaming as he stood by the window. Sipping a cup of tisane he had insisted the kitchen prepare to his exact specifications. His green eyes, usually so sharp, held a contemplative softness as he gazed at the gardens, where dew glistened on the manicured hedges. Hastings joined him, his own thoughts a tangle of admiration and unease. "You were extraordinary, Poirot," Hastings said, folding a shirt with care. "The way you pieced it together, the petal, the watch, the scream. I thought Clara or Dr. Grayson were the culprits, but Lady Margaret, it was a shock." Poirot turned, his expression thoughtful. "Mon ami, the shock. It is always in the truth. Lady Margaret was a woman of great strength, but also great pride. To her, the estate was not merely a home, but a monument to her family's name. When Monsieur Crane threatened to dismantle it, she saw no other path but to silence him." Hastings nodded, recalling the dramatic confrontation in the drawing room. "But the scream, how did you know it was hers? And the watch, stopped at 9:02, it was such a clever ruse." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The scream, Hastings, was too deliberate, too timed. A man stabbed in the heart does not scream so loudly, nor does a dying man pause to stop his watch. These were acts of calculation designed to mislead. The petal, fresh and uncrushed, betrayed her presence in the library, and the draft letter in the study confirmed her motive. The little gray cells, they see the pattern where others see only confusion." Hastings paused, his hands resting on his suitcase. "And the family, what happens to them now? Reginald and Clara, Evelyn? They're shattered." Poirot's gaze returned to the gardens, his voice soft. "The truth, it is a bitter medicine, Hastings. The Ashbournes must now face their future without Lady Margaret's guiding hand. Reginald will inherit the estate, but the debts and the scandal, they will not vanish easily. Clara's indiscretion, Evelyn's anger, these wounds will heal but slowly, yet in time they may find strength in their honesty." A knock at the door interrupted them. Evelyn Ashbourne entered, her face pale but composed, her green eyes carrying a new maturity. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted to thank you before you leave. What you did, it was painful but necessary. Grandmother's actions were wrong, but I understand why she did it. She thought she was protecting us." Poirot inclined his head, his manner gentle. "Mademoiselle, your grandmother acted out of love, however misguided. But the truth, it sets you free, even if it wounds. You are young and you have the courage to face what comes next." Evelyn's lips trembled, but she nodded. A father and mother are talking again properly, for the first time in months. It's a start. And I'm going to London to study. I want to make something of myself. Beyond this house, Poirot's eyes twinkled with approval. "That is wise, mademoiselle. The future, it belongs to those who dare to shape it." As Evelyn left, Hastings felt a spark of hope. The manner was wounded but not broken. He turned to Poirot, who was adjusting his tie in the mirror. "You've given them a chance, Poirot. They might have lost everything if Crane's blackmail had continued. Poirot's reflection met his eyes. "We, Hastings, but at what cost? A life taken, a family torn apart. Justice is served, but it is not always a victory. The human heart, it is a complex thing, capable of great love and great destruction." They descended the grand staircase, their footsteps echoing in the silent hall. The grandfather clock ticked on, its rhythm a reminder of the time that had marked Crane's death and the manor's unraveling. Outside, a car waited to take them to the station, where a train would carry them back to London. As they stepped into the crisp morning air, Poirot paused, glancing back at the ivy-clad facade of Blackthorn Manor. "This house, it holds many stories, Hastings," he said softly. "Some of love, some of sorrow. We have uncovered one, but others remain, hidden in its walls." Hastings smiled, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. "You sound almost poetic, Poirot. But I suppose that's what makes you so good at this, seeing the stories behind the clues." Poirot chuckled, a rare warmth in his voice. "Perhaps, mon ami. But now we return to civilization, where the coffee is tolerable and the mysteries they await. Come, the train will not delay for Hercule Poirot." They climbed into the car, the manor receding behind them, its secrets now exposed to the light. Hastings leaned back, his mind replaying the case, the petal, the watch, the scream, the letter. Poirot's logic had prevailed, as always, but the echoes of Blackthorn Manor's tragedy would linger, a reminder of the delicate balance between truth and the human heart. Chapter 13. Shadows of Motive. The train to London rattled through the Sussex countryside, its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had enveloped Blackthorn Manor. Hercule Poirot, seated in a plush compartment, gazed out at the passing fields, his green eyes reflective, his fingers delicately tracing the rim of a small porcelain cup filled with tisane. Captain Arthur Hastings, opposite him, fidgeted with his newspaper, unable to shake the lingering unease of the case. Lady Margaret's confession had resolved the murder of Victor Crane, yet questions lingered, like shadows cast by the manor's secrets. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, folding the newspaper, "you were brilliant as always, but I can't help feeling we've left something unresolved. The family's future, the estate's debts. There's more to it, isn't there?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, though his eyes remained distant. "Mon ami, you are perceptive. The murder of Monsieur Crane, it is solved, oui, but the motives that drove it, they are like ripples in a pond, spreading far beyond the act itself. Lady Margaret acted to protect her family's legacy, but the secrets she guarded, they touch others in ways we have not fully explored." Hastings frowned, leaning forward. "You mean there's more to the fraud in Sir Henry's will? Or something else Crane knew?" Poirot set down his cup, his movements precise. "Précisément, Hastings. The fraud, it was not merely a matter of hidden funds. It was a web of deception woven over years, involving not just Lady Margaret but others who benefited from the estate's illusion of wealth. Crane's blackmail, it was not only about Madame Clara's affair or the debts, it was about power, control, and the fear of exposure." Hastings' mind raced, recalling the clues, the orchid petal, the stopped watch, the letter with its single word, inheritance. But who else could be involved? Reginald seemed genuinely shocked by his mother's actions, and Clara's confession about the affair seemed complete. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The heart, Hastings, it is a labyrinth. Consider this. The letters in Crane's briefcase, they were not only about Clara and Dr. Grayson. There were others in a different hand, hinting at transactions that benefited someone outside the immediate family. I suspect Crane was preparing to expose a broader conspiracy, one that Lady Margaret silenced at great cost." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think someone else in the manor was complicit in the fraud? But who? Evelyn? Dr. Grayson? Beatrice?" Poirot raised a hand, his tone measured. Patience, mon ami. The evidence, it points to a shadow figure, someone who moved unseen. Thomas, the hall boy, spoke of overhearing arguments, of papers Crane entrusted to him. Those papers, they were not all found in the library. Some, I believe, remain hidden, perhaps in the manor, perhaps elsewhere. Hastings leaned back, his mind grappling with the implications. So, Lady Margaret's act, was it to protect someone else as well? Poirot nodded. It is possible. She confessed to save the family, but also perhaps to shield another. The petal, it was her mistake, but the scream, the watch. These were calculated to protect the true scope of the conspiracy. We have solved the murder, but the deeper truth, it eludes us still. The train whistle sounded, signaling their approach to London. Poirot adjusted his tie, a gesture of restoring order to his world. For now, Hastings, we return to our lives. But I shall keep an eye on Blackthorn Manor. The Ashbournes, they will face their trials, legal, financial, emotional. And perhaps in time, the remaining secrets will surface. Hastings nodded, though his heart was heavy. It's a grim business, Poirot. The family's torn apart, and the manor may not survive the debts. Do you think Evelyn will manage with her plans for London? Poirot's expression softened. Mademoiselle Evelyn, she has spirit. The young, they adapt, they rebuild. She will carry the weight of her family's past, but she will forge her own path. As for the manor, it is but stone and memory. The true legacy is in the hearts of those who remain. The train slowed, the platform of Victoria Station coming into view. Hastings gathered his belongings, his thoughts still on the manor. You're right, of course. But I can't help wondering, what if there's another crime waiting in those shadows? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Then, mon ami, we shall be ready. The little gray cells, they do not rest. But for now, a proper cup of coffee awaits in London, and I, Hercule Poirot, have earned it. As they stepped onto the platform, the bustle of the city enveloped them, a stark contrast to the oppressive quiet of Blackthorn Manor. Hastings glanced back, as if he could still see the ivy-clad walls in the distance. The case was closed, but its echoes lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between truth and deception, and the price paid when secrets are buried too deep. Chapter 14. The Unseen Threads. The London air was crisp as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings stepped out of Victoria Station. The city's clamor a jarring contrast to the somber stillness of Blackthorn Manor. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the autumn chill, walked with a purposeful stride, his mind clearly still turning over the intricacies of the case. Hastings, trailing slightly, carried their luggage, his thoughts tangled with the unresolved questions that lingered after Lady Margaret's confession. The murder of Victor Crane had been solved, but the deeper currents of motive and secrecy continued to trouble him. As they hailed a cab to Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions, Hastings broke the silence. Poirot, you said there might be more to the conspiracy at Blackthorn Manor. Do you really think there's another layer we haven't uncovered? Lady Margaret's confession seemed so final, Poirot's green eyes flickered with a familiar spark. Mon ami, a confession, it is like the final act of a play, but the curtain does not always fall on the whole truth. Lady Margaret, she took responsibility for the murder, but her motives were not solely her own. The fraud in the will, the hidden funds, these were not the work of one person alone. There are threads, Hastings, unseen threads that connect others to this crime. The cab rattled through the bustling streets, and Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. You mean someone else was involved in the fraud? But who? Reginald seemed unaware, and Clara's affair was a separate matter. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. You are correct to question, Hastings. Reginald, he was distracted by the debts, Clara by her indiscretion. But consider this. The letters in Crane's briefcase, they hinted at transactions beyond the family. And Thomas, the hall boy, spoke of overhearing arguments not just between Crane and Reginald, but with another voice, one he could not place. Who else stood to gain from the estate's secrets? Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Dr. Grayson, perhaps. He was close to the family, and his affair with Clara gave him leverage. Or Beatrice. She knew more than she let on. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. Précisément. The good doctor, he is a possibility. His knowledge of the family's affairs, his presence in the conservatory, it places him near the heart of the matter. And Madame Beatrice, her theatrical denials, they conceal a sharp mind. But there is another possibility, one we have overlooked, the estate itself. Hastings blinked. The estate? You mean the manor, or the business? The business, Poirot said, his voice low. Sir Henry's shipping empire, it was the source of the wealth and the source of the fraud. Crane, as solicitor, had access to the accounts. What if he discovered not just hidden funds, but a partner in the deception? Someone outside the family, perhaps a business associate, who profited from the falsified records. The cab pulled up to Whitehaven Mansions, and Poirot paid the driver with his usual precision. As they ascended to his flat, Hastings pressed further. But if there's another player, why didn't Lady Margaret name them? She confessed to protect the family, why not expose the whole truth? Poirot unlocked the door, ushering Hastings inside. The flat was a haven of order, its polished surfaces a reflection of Poirot's meticulous nature. Because, mon ami, to name another would unravel the very legacy she sought to protect. Lady Margaret, she is a woman of pride, but also of strategy. By taking the blame, she shields the family from further scandal. But the papers, the ones Thomas did not find, these may hold the key to the true scope of the conspiracy. Poirot poured 2 cups of tisane, handing one to Hastings. I have asked Inspector Grayson to search the manor thoroughly, particularly the study and Crane's quarters. If there are documents hidden, they may reveal the name of this shadow figure. Hastings sipped the tisane, its warmth soothing his unease. And if they find nothing? What then? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then, Hastings, we rely on the little gray cells. The truth, it leaves traces even in the absence of evidence. The behavior of the family, the inconsistencies in their stories, these are clues in themselves. I suspect that Evelyn, with her sharp mind, may yet uncover something. She is determined to forge her own path, and in doing so, she may stumble upon the secrets her grandmother buried. Hastings set down his cup, his thoughts returning to Blackthorn Manor. It's a grim legacy, isn't it? The manor, the family, all tied to deceit and murder. Do you think they'll recover? Poirot's expression softened. The human spirit, it is resilient, Hastings. The Ashbournes, they will face their trials, debts, scandal, loss. But Evelyn, she has the fire of youth, and Reginald and Clara, they may find strength in their renewed bond. The manor, it may stand or fall, but the family, they will endure. He rose, moving to his desk, where a small notebook lay open. For now we rest, mon ami, but I shall keep a watchful eye on Blackthorn Manor. The unseen threads, they will surface in time, and Hercule Poirot will be ready. Hastings nodded, feeling the weight of the case lift slightly. The murder was solved, but the echoes of its motives lingered, a reminder of the complexity of human nature. As he settled into the familiar comfort of Poirot's flat, he couldn't shake the image of Blackthorn Manor, its ivy-clad walls hiding secrets that might yet come to light, waiting for the next chapter in a story that was far from over. Chapter 15. The Final Thread. The soft glow of lamplight illuminated Hercule Poirot's immaculate flat at Whitehaven Mansions, where the detective sat at his desk, a neatly arranged stack of notes before him. The clatter of London's evening traffic filtered through the window, a distant hum that contrasted with the quiet intensity of Poirot's reflections. Captain Arthur Hastings, sprawled in an armchair with a glass of whiskey, watched his friend with a mix of curiosity and fatigue. The case at Blackthorn Manor had been solved, with Lady Margaret's confession tying up the murder of Victor Crane. Yet Poirot's restless demeanor suggested that the final thread of the mystery remained tantalizingly out of reach. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, swirling his drink, "you've been uncommonly quiet since we returned. Lady Margaret's in custody, the murder's solved. Yet you're still turning it over, aren't you? What's nagging at you?" Poirot's green eyes flickered, his fingers pausing over a page in his notebook. "Mon ami, you know me too well. The case, it is closed, oui. But the tapestry of Blackthorn Manor, it is not complete. Lady Margaret's confession, it was a masterstroke. She protected her family, her legacy, by taking the blame. But the fraud, the hidden funds, the shadow figure behind Crane's blackmail, these remain unresolved. The little gray cells, they demand order, and there is one piece yet to place." Hastings sat up, intrigued. "You think there's someone else involved, someone we didn't suspect?" "But who? We've accounted for everyone. Reginald, Clara, Evelyn, the Graysons, even young Thomas." Poirot rose, pacing with his characteristic precision. "Précisément, Hastings. Everyone in the manor was accounted for, yet the letters in Crane's briefcase, they hinted at a larger conspiracy. A name, a transaction, a partner in the fraud, someone who benefited from Sir Henry's deception and Crane's silence. I have requested Inspector Grayson to search the manor's study thoroughly, but I fear the key lies not in papers, but in the human heart." He paused, his gaze distant. "Consider, Hastings, Lady Margaret's scream, it was not just to mislead, it was to protect. But protect whom? Not just her family, but perhaps someone whose role in the fraud was deeper, someone Crane was about to expose." Hastings frowned, his mind retracing the clues. The orchid petal, the stopped watch, the letter with inheritance, the voices in the study. Could it be Dr. Grayson? His affair with Clara gave him motive, and he had access to the conservatory. Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. The doctor. He is a man of weakness, not cunning. His affair was a scandal, but not the heart of the fraud. No, I suspect someone closer to the estate's operations, someone who moved unseen yet wielded influence." A knock at the door interrupted them. A courier, breathless from haste, delivered a sealed envelope from Inspector Grayson. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the contents. A single sheet of paper found hidden in a false drawer in the manor's study desk. It was a ledger page in Crane's meticulous hand, detailing payments to an entity labeled J.H. & Sons, a shipping firm linked to Sir Henry's business. The amounts were staggering, siphoned from the estate over years, disguised as legitimate expenses. Poirot's expression hardened. This, Hastings, is the final thread. J.H. & Sons, it is not a mere supplier, it is a front, a shell for laundering funds. Crane discovered this, and his letter to Lady Margaret was to warn her of his intent to expose it. But who is J.H.? Hastings' eyes widened. A business partner? Someone outside the family? Poirot nodded. Oui, but not entirely outside. I recall a detail, a small one, from Thomas, the hall boy. He mentioned overhearing Crane speak of James during an argument in the study, a name not mentioned by the family. James Harrow, a former partner in Sir Henry's shipping business, dismissed years ago but never fully severed from the estate's affairs. Lady Margaret, she protected him, perhaps out of loyalty to her husband's memory or fear of his retaliation. Hastings leaned forward, gripped by the revelation. So Harrow was the shadow figure? But why didn't Crane name him outright? Poirot's smile was grim. Because Crane, he was greedy. He blackmailed not only Clara and Dr. Grayson, but also Harrow, extracting payments to keep silent. Lady Margaret, knowing the fraud's scope, killed Crane to protect both her family and Harrow, fearing the collapse of the entire estate. He sat, his fingers steeple. I shall inform Inspector Grayson to investigate James Harrow. The ledger, it is evidence enough to pursue him. Lady Margaret's confession, it was a sacrifice to shield this final secret, but the truth, it always finds a way. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You've done it again, Poirot. You saw what none of us could, the unseen threads tying it all together. Poirot's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. The truth, Hastings, it is a heavy burden. Lady Margaret, she acted for love of her family, but at what cost? The manor, it may fall to ruin, but the Ashbournes, they have a chance to rebuild, to live without the shadow of lies. He rose, moving to the window where the lights of London sparkled. For now, mon ami, we rest. The case is closed, the final thread woven into place. But the heart, it will always surprise us with its capacity for both deception and redemption. Hastings nodded, finishing his whiskey. Blackthorn Manor's secrets had been laid bare, its tragedy complete. Yet as he watched Poirot, he knew the detective's mind was already turning to the next puzzle, ready to unravel the complexities of human nature with the unerring precision of his little gray cells. The train had carried them away from the manor, but its echoes would linger, a testament to the enduring power of truth, no matter how deeply buried.